This is a continuation of The Status Civilization by Robert Sheckley, comprising chapters 28 through 30 and the end. Chapter 28. Dravivian led him into a large room paneled in walnut. The furniture was of a heavy black wood, intricately carved and varnished. The desk, high and straight, seemed to be an antique. A heavy tapestry covered one entire wall. It depicted, in fading colors, a medieval hunting scene. "Do you like it?" Dravivian asked. "My family did the furnishing. My wife copied the tapestry from an original in the Metropolitan Museum. My two sons collaborated on the furniture. They wanted something ancient and Spanish in feeling, but with more comfort than antiques usually give. A slight modification of the lines accomplished that. My own contributions are not visible. Music of the Baroque period is my specialty." "Aside from police work," Barent said. "Yes, aside from that." Dravivian turned away from Barent and looked thoughtfully at the tapestry. "We will come to the matter of the police in due course. Tell me first, what do you think of this room?" "It's very beautiful," Barent said. "Yes, and, well, I'm no judge." "You must judge," Dravivian said. "In this room you can see Earth's civilization in miniature. Tell me what you think of it." "It feels lifeless," Barent said. Dravivian turned to Barent and smiled. "Yes, that's a good word for it. Self-involved might perhaps be better. This is a high-status room, Barent. A great deal of creativity has gone into the artistic improvement of ancient archetypes. My family has recreated a bit of the Spanish past, as others have recreated bits of the Mayan, early American, or Oceanic past. And yet, the essential hollowness is obvious. Our automatized factories produce the same goods for us year in and year out. Since everyone has these same goods, it is necessary for us to change the factory product, to improve and embroider it, to express ourselves through it, to rank ourselves by it. That's how Earth is, Barent. Our energy and skills are channeled into essentially decadent pursuits. We recarve old furniture, worry about rank and status, and in the meantime the frontier of the distant planets remains unexplored and unconquered. We ceased long ago to expand. Stability brought the danger of stagnation, to which we succumbed. We became so highly socialized that individuality had to be diverted to the most harmless of pursuits, turned inward, kept from any meaningful expression. I think you have seen a fair amount of that in your time on Earth." "I have. But I never expected to hear the chief of the secret police say it." "I'm an unusual man," Dravivian said with a mocking smile. "And the secret police is an unusual institution. It must be very efficient. How did you find out about me?" "That was really quite simple. Most of the people of Earth are security conditioned from childhood. It's part of our heritage, you know. Nearly all the people you met were able to tell that there was something very wrong about you. You were as obviously out of place as a wolf among sheep. People noticed and reported directly to me." "All right," Barent said. "Now what?" "First, I would like you to tell me about Omega." Barent told the police chief about his life on the prison planet. Dravivian nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "Yes. It's very much as I expected," he said. "The same sort of thing has happened on Omega, as happened in early America and Australia. There are differences, of course. You have been shut off more completely from the mother country. But the same fierce energy and drive is there, and the same ruthlessness." "What are you going to do?" Barent asked. Dravivian shrugged his shoulders. "It really doesn't matter. I suppose I could kill you. But that wouldn't stop your group on Omega from sending out other spies, or from seizing one of the prison ships. As soon as the Omegans begin to move in force, they'll discover the truth anyhow." "What truth?" "By now it must be obvious to you," Dravivian said. "Earth hasn't fought a war for nearly 800 years. We wouldn't know how. The organization of guardships around Omega is pure facade. The ships are completely automatized, built to meet conditions of several hundreds years ago. A determined attack will capture a ship, and when you have one, the rest will fall. After that, there's nothing to stop the Omegans from coming back to Earth, and there's nothing on Earth to fight them with. This, you must realize, is the reason why all prisoners leaving Earth are divorced from their memories. If they remembered, Earth's vulnerability would be painfully apparent. If you knew all this, Barrett asked, why didn't your leaders do something about it? That was our original intention, but there was no real drive behind the intention. We preferred not to think about it. We assumed the status quo would remain indefinitely. We didn't want to think about the day when the Omegans returned to Earth. What are you and your police going to do about it? Barrett asked. I am Facade too, Dravivian told him. I have no police. The position of chief is entirely honorary. There has been no need of a police force on Earth for close to a century. You're going to need one when the Omegans come home, Barrett said. Yes, there's going to be crime again, and serious trouble. But I think the final amalgamation will be successful. You on Omega have the drive, the ambition to reach the stars. I believe you need a certain stability and creativeness which Earth can provide. Whatever the results, the union is inevitable. We've lived in a dream here for too long. It's going to take violent measures to awaken us. Dravivian rose to his feet. And now, he said, since the fate of Earth and Omega seem to be decided, could I offer you some refreshment? Chapter 29. With the help of the chief of police, Barrett put a message aboard the next ship to leave for Omega. The message told about conditions on Earth and urged immediate action. When that was finished, Barrett was ready for his final job, to find the judge who had sentenced him for a crime he hadn't committed, and the lying informer who had turned him into the judge. When he found those two, Barrett knew he would regain the missing portions of his memory. He took the night expressway to Youngerstun. His suspicions, sharply keyed from life on Omega, would not let him rest. There had to be a catch to all this splendid simplicity. Perhaps he would find it in Youngerstun. By early morning he was there. Superficially, the neat rows of houses looked the same as in any other town. But for Barrett they were different, and achingly familiar. He remembered this town, and the monotonous houses had individuality and meaning for him. He had been born and raised in this town. There was Grothmir's store, and across the street was the home of Havening, the local interior decorating champion. Here was Billy Havelock's house. Billy had been his best friend. They had planned on being starmen together, and had remained good friends after school, until Barrett had been sentenced to Omega. Here was Andrew Thurkaler's house, and down the block was the school he had attended. He could remember the classes. He could remember how, every day, they had gone through the door that led to the closed class. But he still could not remember what he had learned there. Right here, near two huge elms, the murder had taken place. Barrett walked to the spot and remembered how it had happened. He had been on his way home. From somewhere down the street, he had heard a scream. He had turned, and a man, Iliardi, had run down the street and thrown something at him. Barrett had caught it instinctively and found himself holding an illegal handgun. A few steps further, he had looked into the twisted dead face of Andrew Thurkaler. And what had happened next? Confusion. Panic. A sensation of someone watching as he stood, weapon in hand, over the corpse. There, at the end of the street, was the refuge to which he had gone. He walked up to it and recognized it as a robot confessional booth. Barrett entered the booth. It was small, and there was a faint odor of incense in the air. The room contained a single chair. Facing it was a complex, brilliantly lighted panel. "Good morning, Will," the panel said to him. Barrett had a sudden sense of helplessness when he heard that soft, mechanical voice. He remembered it now. The passionless voice knew all, understood all, and forgave nothing. That artfully manufactured voice had spoken to him, had listened, and then had judged. In his dream, he had personified the robot confessor into the figure of a human judge. "You remember me?" Barrett asked. "Of course," said the robot confessor. "You were one of my parishioners before you went to Omega. You sent me there for the crime of murder." "But I didn't commit the crime," Barrett said. "I didn't do it, and you must have known it." "Of course I knew it," the robot confessor said. "But my powers and duties are strictly defined. I sentence according to evidence, not intuition. By law, the robot confessors must weigh only the concrete evidence which is put before them. They must, when in doubt, sentence. In fact, the mere presence of a man before me charged with murder must be taken as a strong presumption of his guilt." Was there evidence against me? Yes. Who gave it? I cannot reveal his name. You must, Barent said. Times are changing on Earth. The prisoners are coming back. Did you know that? I expected it, the robot confessor said. I must have the informer's name, Barent said. He took the needle beam out of his pocket and advanced toward the panel. A machine cannot be coerced, the robot confessor told him. Give me the name, Barent shouted. I should not, for your own good. The danger would be too great. Believe me, Will. The name. Very well. You will find the informer at 35 Maple Street, but I earnestly advise you not to go there. You will be killed. You simply do not know. Barent pressed the trigger, and the narrow beam scythed through the panel. Lights flashed and faded as he cut through the intricate wiring. At last all the lights were dead, and a faint gray smoke came from the panel. Barent left the booth. He put the needle beam back in his pocket and walked to Maple Street. He had been here before. He knew this street, set upon a hill, rising steeply between oak and maple trees. Those lampposts were old friends. That crack in the pavement was an ancient landmark. Here were the houses, heavy with familiarity. They seemed to lean expectantly toward him, like spectators waiting for the final act of an almost forgotten drama. He stood in front of 35 Maple Street. The silence which surrounded that plain, white-shuttered house struck him as ominous. He took the needle beam out of his pocket, looking for a reassurance he knew he could not find. Then, he walked up the neat flagstones and tried the front door. It opened. He stepped inside. He made out the dim shades of lamps and furniture, the dull gleam of a painting on the wall, a piece of statuary on an ebony pedestal. Needle beam in hand, he stepped into the next room, and came face to face with the informer. Staring at the informer's face, Barent remembered. In an overpowering flood of memory, he saw himself, a little boy, entering the closed classroom. He heard again the soothing hum of machinery, watched the pretty lights blink and flash, heard the insinuating machine voice whisper in his ear. At first, the voice filled him with horror. What it suggested was unthinkable. Then, slowly, he became accustomed to it, and accustomed to all the strange things that happened in the closed classroom. He learned. The machines taught on deep unconscious levels. The machines intertwined their lessons with the basic drives, weaving a pattern of learned behavior with the life instinct. They taught, then blocked off conscious knowledge of the lessons, sealed it, and fused it. What had he been taught? For the social good, you must be your own policeman and witness. You must assume responsibility for any crime which might conceivably be yours. The face of the informer stared impassively at him. It was Barent's own face, reflected back from a mirror on the wall. He had informed on himself. Standing with the gun in his hand that day, looking down at the murdered man, learned unconscious processes had taken over. The presumption of guilt had been too great for him to resist. The similarity to guilt had turned into guilt itself. He had walked to the robot confessor's booth, and there he had given complete and damning evidence against himself, had indicted himself on the basis of probability. The robot confessor had passed the obligatory sentence and Barent had left the booth. Well trained in the lessons of the classroom, he had taken himself into custody, had gone to the nearest thought control center in Trenton. Already a partial amnesia had taken place, keyed to and triggered by the lessons of the closed classroom. The skilled android technicians in the thought control center had labored hard to complete this amnesia, to obliterate any remnants of memory. As a standard safeguard against any possible recovering of his memory, they had implanted a logical construct of his crime beneath the conscious level. As the regulations required, this construct contained an implication of the far-reaching power of Earth. When the job was completed, an automatized Barent had marched out of the center, taken a special expressway to the prison ship depot, boarded the prison ship, entered his cell, and closed the door and left Earth behind him. Then he had slept until the checkpoint had been passed, after which the newly arrived guards awakened the prisoners for disembarkation on Omega. Now, staring at his own face in the mirror, the last of the conscious lessons of the classroom became conscious. The lessons of the closed classroom must never be consciously known by the individual. If they become conscious, the human organism must perform an immediate act of self-destruction. Now he saw why his conquest of Earth had been so easy. It was because he had conquered nothing. Earth needed no security forces, for the policeman and the executioner were implanted in every man's mind. Beneath the surface of Earth's mild and pleasant culture was a self-perpetuating robot civilization. An awareness of that civilization was punishable by death. And here, at this moment, the real struggle for Earth began. Learned behavior patterns intertwined with basic life drives forced Barrett to raise the needle beam, to point it toward his head. This was what the robot confessor had tried to warn him about, and what the mutant girl had screened. The younger Barrett, conditioned to absolute and mindless conformity, had to kill himself. The older Barrett, who had spent time on Omega, fought that blind urge. A schizophrenic Barrett fought himself. The two parts of him battled for possession of the weapon, for control of the body, for ownership of the mind. The needle beam's movement stopped inches from his head. The muzzle wavered. Then slowly, the new Omegan Barrett, Barrett 2, forced the weapon away. His victory was short-lived. For now the lessons of the closed classroom took over, forcing Barrett 2 into a contra-survival struggle with the implacable and death-desiring Barrett 1. Chapter 30. Conditioning took over and flung the fighting Barretts backward through subjective time, to those stress points in the past where death had been near, where the temporal life fabric had been weakened, where a predisposition toward death had already been established. Conditioning forced Barrett 2 to re-experience those moments. But this time, the danger was augmented by the full force of the malignant half of his personality, by the murderous informer, Barrett 1. Barrett 2 stood under glaring lights on the blood-stained sands of the arena, a sword in his hand. It was the time of the Omegan Games. Coming at him was the Saunus, a heavily armored reptile with the leering face of Barrett 1. Barrett 2 severed the creature's tail, and it changed into 3 trichomotrids, rat-sized, Barrett-faced, with the dispositions of rabid wolverines. He killed 2, and the third grinned and bit his left hand to the bone. He killed it, and watched Barrett 1's blood leak into the soggy sand. 3 ragged men sat laughing on a bench, and a girl handed him a small gun. "Luck," she said. "I hope you know how to use this." Barrett nodded his thanks before he noticed that the girl was not Moira. She was the skrenning mutant who had predicted his death. Still, he moved into the street and faced the 3 Hajis. 2 of the men were mild-faced strangers. The third, Barrett 1, stepped forward and quickly brought his gun into firing position. Barrett 2 flung himself to the ground and pressed the trigger of his unfamiliar weapon. He felt it vibrate in his hand and saw Haji Barrett's head and shoulders turn black and begin to crumble. Before he could take aim again, his gun was wrenched violently from his hand. Barrett 1's dying shot had creased the end of the muzzle. Desperately, he dived for the weapon, and as he rolled toward it, he saw the second man, now wearing the Barrett 1 face, take careful aim. Barrett 2 felt pain flash through his arm, already torn by the trichomotrid's teeth. He managed to shoot this Barrett 1, and through a haze of pain faced the third man, now also Barrett 1. His arm was stiffening rapidly, but he forced himself to press the trigger. "You're playing their game," Barrett 2 told himself. "The death conditioning will wear you down, will kill you. You must see through it, get past it. It isn't really happening. It's in your mind." But there was no time to think. He was in a large, circular, high-ceilinged room of stone in the cellars of the Department of Justice. It was the trial by ordeal. Rolling across the floor toward him was a glistening black machine shaped like a half-sphere, standing almost 4 feet high. It came at him, and in the pattern of red, green, and amber lights, he could see the hated face of Barrett 1. Now his enemy was in its ultimate form. The invariant robot consciousness, as false and stylized as the conditioned dreams of Earth. The Barrett machine extruded a single slender tentacle with a white light winking at the end of it. As it approached, the tentacle withdrew, and in its place appeared a jointed metal arm ending in a knife edge. Barrett 2 dodged, and heard the knife scrape against the stone. "It isn't what you think it is," Barrett 2 told himself. "It isn't a machine, and you are not back on Omega. This is only half of yourself you are fighting. This is nothing but a deadly illusion." But he couldn't believe it. The Barrent machine was coming at him again, its metal hide glistening with a foul green substance which Barrent too recognized immediately as contact poison. He broke into a sprint, trying to stay away from the fatal touch. It isn't fatal, he told himself. Neutralizer washed over the metal surface, clearing away the poison. The machine tried to ram him. Barrent tried half-heartedly to push it aside. It crashed into him with stunning force, and he could feel ribs splintering. It isn't real. You're letting a conditioned reflex talk you to death. You aren't on Omega. You're on Earth, in your own home, staring into a mirror. But the pain was real, and the clubbed metal arm felt real as it crashed against his shoulder. Barrent staggered away. He felt horror, not at dying, but at dying too soon, before he could warn the Omegans of this ultimate danger planted deep in their own minds. There was no one else to warn of the catastrophe that would strike each man as he recovered his own specific memories of Earth. To his best knowledge, no one had experienced this and lived. If he could live through it, countermeasures could be taken, counter-conditioning could be set up. He pulled himself to his feet. Coached since childhood in social responsibility, he thought of it now. He couldn't allow himself to die when his knowledge was vital to Omega. This is not a real machine. He repeated it to himself as the Barrent machine revved up, picked up speed, and hurtled toward him from the far side of the room. He forced himself to see beyond the machine, to see the patient droning lessons of the classroom which had created this monster in his mind. This is not a real machine. He believed it, and swung his fist into the hated face reflected in the metal. There was a moment of dazzling pain, and then he lost consciousness. When he came to, he was alone in his own home on Earth. His arm and shoulder ached, and several of his ribs seemed to be broken. On his left hand he bore the stigmata of the trichomotord's bite. But with his cut and bleeding right hand he had smashed the mirror. He had shattered it, and Barrent utterly and forever. The end. Best Audiobooks for Free hopes that you have enjoyed this production of The Status Civilization by Robert Sheckley. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble, as your subscription is the support we need to create more, great, free content. Please look to our website at bestaudiobooksforfree.com for a complete list of our audiobooks.